give a virtual round of applause for Candace Wiley.
Good evening, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Hurston Wright, for having me again. Second annual rendezvous. And uh, it's always good to be in the presence of writers and to get to hear some great writing. So, one thing I would like to encourage everybody to do is when you hear a dope line, if something hits your soul, go ahead and jot it in the chat so that we can all like circle back and resonate with it too. That would be wonderful. We're going to start with Courtney Faye Taylor, who is a writer, visual artist, and author of Concentrate, selected by Rachel Eliza Griffiths as the winner of the Cave Canem Poetry Prize. Concentrate is the winner of the T.S. Eliot Four Quartets Prize from the Poetry Society of America and was a finalist for the NAACP Image Awards, the Lambda Literary Awards, and the Society of Midland Authors Award. This collection has been featured in Essence Magazine, the Los Angeles Times, and named among the best poetry of last year by Miss Magazine. Courtney Faye Taylor is nominated for the Poetry Award for Concentrate at the 2023 Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy Awards ceremony. Courtney, I'll let you take it from here.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. I'm going to read from the center section of my book, which is kind of this photographic essay about a trip that I took to Los Angeles to visit some of the sites that relate to the murder of Latasha Harlins. She was a Black girl who lived in South Central Los Angeles in the early 90s and was killed inside of a convenience store after being accused of trying to shoplift a bottle of orange juice. And her murder is one of the catalysts for the LA uprising in the following year. And this part of the essay is about my trip to a local recreational center in Los Angeles that has a memorial in her name. On my way to the Algon Sudden Recreation Center, I take in Vermont Vista, Barbary fig in a front yard, the Virgin Mary taped against a window, two men chatting in lawn chairs on a driveway, a clothesline flaunting mauve sheets behind them. It's quiet, foreign to my assumptions, which are all tutored by television. I'm at the rec center to view a mural of Latasha. Artist Victoria Casanova painted it on the building's side face in early 2021. The color, still young. I rub its hem, half expecting to draw back a rich hand. The only section segregated from the palette are three small doves tarrying off to the right of Latasha's head, their flight defined in sobering grayscale. Here I learned Latasha was a poet. Opposite the doves, Casanova transcribed a poem of Latasha's written a month before her death. Her piece is reminiscent of an I am poem I wrote in grade school. I was given I am blank and asked to fill in the blanks 10 times or so. Often I switched I am for stronger leads. I wonder, I hear, I see, I pretend, I dream. I am. I am a beautiful girl who is scared of what may happen in the future. I wonder if dolls move or talk when you're not looking. I hear nature's cry. I see the ship going to the Bahamas. I want my family to never get sick. I am a beautiful girl who is scared of what may happen in the future. I pretend to be characters in movies. I feel tornadoes are scary. I touch the ocean's bank. I worry that there will not be enough room for people on Earth in the future. I cry during sad movies. I am a beautiful girl who is scared of what may happen in the future. I understand that everything doesn't go your way. I say treat Blacks the same as you would treat whites. I dream that the world was perfect. I try to be successful in school. I hope my mother will live a long and healthy life. I am a beautiful girl who is scared of what may happen in the future. My poem, maimed by fear of catastrophe, of breath in the inanimate, unbridled anxiety, but in Latasha's work, there's uninterrupted possibility. Reading her lines, I bear witness to how a Black girl once spoke life into herself. I have a lot of talent, she writes. Latasha could dance, which earned her a spot on the Algen Sudden drill team. Her favorite artist was Belle Biv DeVoe, and so when I imagine her moves, I imagine them scored by New Jack. I care by giving what I have to people who actually need it, she writes. Latasha wanted to study law, a dream had in the aftermath of her mother's murder. Latasha understood there to be a world of women non-white and wounded, a world of mothers refused long, healthy lives. She recognized there to be a world lacking people who cared about this, people unwilling to give what they have. I am very reliable and trustworthy, she writes. That word, trust, it pops me in the mouth. Suja's lack of trust is the cause of this mural, the impetus for our public display of memory. But as I see here, trust was something Latasha had already affirmed in herself. Her trustworthiness on March 16, 1991, was fact. Some yards behind the mural sits a playground where Latasha spent her youth. That, too, is bestowed with her name now. A child's murder leaves a hypertrophic scar on the place where it happens. Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson affirmed this at the playground's unveiling. Mississippi has Emmett Till. Florida's got Trayvon Martin. Los Angeles has Latasha Harlins. Now, whenever the babies of Vermont Vista climb and swing and slide, they will be doing so in the scarred lap of legacy. A child may ask, who? The adults will answer however they do, but their answers will irritate history. I'm lifted by the mural in the playground, but Algen Sudden is a haunted home for them. It is both Latasha's adolescent sanctuary and her inauguration into abuse, the place where she was pursued by a counselor twice her age. Jerry was a source of argument in the Harlan's household. So you think you grown? You think you in love? I care by giving, she writes. Rape is a room within every cishet man. It's either locked or ornerously doorless. There's no hotline there, no soap. On the nightstand, a lobbyist kills the age of permission. In the armoire, a god nears the end of its utility. Outside, a chauffeur waits to escort us to the curb of our murders. An auntie is driven nieceless. I show people I care by giving what I have, she writes. Aunt Denise pulls up to the rec center in 91 to begin resistance. Her message to this nigga is quite simple. Stop touching my child. When she exits, he's left with eavesdropping colleagues, and his next move is to disprove. He calls Denise a drunk, says she's clearly out her mind. Don't nobody know what she talking about. Don't nobody want nothing to do with no girl. So don't nobody in the rec center make a report. Don't nobody in the rec keep an eye on Latasha. Don't nobody in the rec protect this baby. Jerry continues his violence until there is no more Latasha to violence. Don't nobody consider her a baby. I know whatever I set my mind on something, I can accomplish. I show people, she writes. Men like Jerry get away with murder because their murders are of the innocent. Innocence is a fact you must believe in to save. Innocence is a fact we'll need a warrant to touch. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had to turn my lights off so I can get all that poetry. Let me get it back on. I'm sorry, y'all. Ooh. Innocence is a fact you must believe in. Oh my goodness. Okay. All right. Y'all give it up for Miss Courtney. So I want to ask you, Courtney, if we're thinking about truth popping somebody in the mouth, right? And that being a phrase that is commonly associated with, parenting. we've got her, I mean, in this poem, we have her mother trying to defend her. We have her mother also, like the murder mentioned. We have this truth popping someone in the mouth, you being you, the narrator, you, the speaker. And I mean, can you just run through some trains of thought? And that's my question. I'm going to leave it there, and you take hold.
Yeah, I think I went to LA after I had completely written the book. And so I had never been before. And so I was going really out of this sort of imposter syndrome of like, I've not been to this city, yet I've written all these things about it. I need to go here and make sure I have everything right. And so I visited these various places that I had only written about based off reading and research. And so I turned that trip into this essay, but it was a collection of field notes. And I think with this particular section, it just kind of follows my train of thinking, all the connections that I make just standing in this place. So reading Latasha's poetry and thinking of a poem that I wrote, thinking about how she was as a girl and how I was as a girl, and how our girlhoods differ and are similar, but also thinking about the things that shortened her girlhood, both her literal murder, but also sexual violence. And those difficult emotions kind of coming up when I see this, recreational center that is really like the place where there's a playground in her name and this memorial, this mural, but like also this history of something darker happening there. So I think in putting this together, it was just kind of following all those trains of thought that I was kind of holding on to in the moment.
When I'm just thinking about, I mean, it is so full. It's such a full poem. It's so full. It's so heavy, like with the weight of lyricism. So I'm excited to read it again. Everybody's going to run out and grab the book. But also, are there other places that you would like people to find you, maybe on the digital scape?
Yes, you can find everything in my website at CourtneyFayeTaylor.com. And so all my email and social media is linked there. So thank you so much.
Beautiful, beautiful. We will move to our next writer. Natasha Gordon Chipembere holds a PhD in English from the University of South Africa and is the recipient of the Silver Ippy Award, among others. In 2015, she founded and continues to host the Tango Said annual writing retreats in Costa Rica. Natasha Gordon Chipembere is nominated for the Debut Fiction Award for her book, Finding La Negrita, at the 2023 Hurston Wright Foundation's Legacy Awards ceremony. Natasha.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you can all hear me. Thank you so much for this introduction. I'm so excited to be here and be in community, and very much honored to be nominated. I am reading the prologue of my historical fiction novel, Finding La Negrita. And La Negrita is the local Costa Rican word for the Black Madonna in Costa Rica. So this is a historical Africanist rendering of the Black Madonna in colonial Costa Rica, set in 1634. And so I am reading the prologue. Fragrant, luxurious, indigo blue. This is the color of night that engulfs Tuela as she enters Lupita's family compound near the center of town. The houses are lumpy shadows as the dark descends. The evening's twilight wraps around her like music. At 25, Tuela is poised in the beauty of her youth. Her mahogany skin accentuates her cheekbones and firmly set brown eyes. Though she leans more on the side of slender, Her full lips have invited many to dream about their taste. It has almost been a year since she has seen her best friend, and she is grateful for this trip with her father so she can visit with Lupita. Since she married 7 years ago and moved with Dakarai near the Zambezi, it is not often that her father plucks her from her sculpting work to accompany him on one of his lecturing trips. But 2 weeks ago, her father appeared at their front door without ceremony and requested her presence with him at the palace in Benguela on the Angolan coast. He was being asked to interpret a new document that had come from northern Timbuktu. She was very familiar with the journey, as she and Dakarai used the same roads on their annual market trip to sell their sculptures. Dakarai had seemed withdrawn when she told him that she would be away for 2 weeks. With a gentle embrace, she left him, ready to change the routine of her world and see Lupita. There was so much on her heart to share, things she could not tell her father. She had noticed his slower gait and even suggested they rest more often, but he remained determined to get there within the usual 6 days. And so now, with the evening air humid with ocean breeze from the coast, and the expanse of sky a midnight blue with the orange rays of a sun no longer visible, Tuela enters the party. There is a fire to the left of the main house in the compound, and that is the source of all activity. Colorful cushions and blankets are strewn around the fire as the crowd of mostly young people sway to the melodic singing of a young man standing with his back towards her. Even from the compound's walls entrance, Tuela can see, because of the fire, that his dark skin is smooth like the Rococo stone she uses to carve her Shona statues. Such a beauty. He is wreathed thin but passionate as his hands wave, enunciating the words he sings without accompaniment. Everyone is mesmerized. His words are in Kikongo, a language she cannot understand, but as she listens while she walks closer to the group, she gets the meaning of his words. They are a lament, perhaps of things to come. His voice pierces the night, and even the dogs settle into stillness. Tuela holds her breath. Closing her eyes, she gulps down the sounds, the pitch of his voice stinging the inside of her chest, and tears appear suddenly. She is startled when she feels arms around her, and it takes a second to realize that Lupita is embracing her. The joy she feels at being held by her friend brings the tears faster, and as she rests her head on Lupita's soft round shoulder, her body shakes with sobs. Lupita simply holds her, perhaps assuming that she is moved by the music as much as the rest of the crowd. They release each other when the song comes to an end, joining the group of about 25 people in a rousing applause. Come, let's go sit away from everyone so you can fill me in on life. I've missed you so much, Tuela, Lupita says as she grabs Tuela's hand and leads her towards the main house. The nearly full moon allows for some light in the darkness as they move away from the fire. In the distance, Tuela can hear that the singer has been convinced to sing a favorite local tune, and other voices eagerly join in once he begins to sing again. Tuela and Lupita enter a small house, round in shape with a thatched cone roof that has an opening in the center for smoke. There is a fire in the middle of the room that brings warmth to the three sleeping children on wooden beds. This is where Lupita lives with her mother and three smaller siblings. Her father resides in the main house, and both he and her mother are gone to visit the palace for the presentation by Tuela's father. Tuela knew the feast afterwards would extend for hours, and this is why she has asked permission to visit with Lupita, who remained in the compound to care for her younger brothers and sister. Lupita is a small wonder. At 24, she is chocolate brown, short and round, with full hips, plump breasts, and a perpetual blush from the beach's constant sun tinging her cheeks, and a ready twinkle in her eyes. Her hair is always plated in the newest styles and bejeweled with shells. She is the object of desire for most young men in the village, but her father's wealthy status in the community leaves most of them pining from afar. Allowed great freedom to invite local friends to share their art at the family compound, Lupita has become known as a great hostess and the center of the cultural scene in Benguela. Once settled in the darkened space, Tuela quietly fills her friend in on her life with Dakarai. She tells about the 7 years of waiting to become a mother and the despair and sadness she feels. Then she is silent. Unburdening her heart has been helpful. Lupita holds her hand and just listens. As she's going to speak, Lupita is suddenly called from outside. Getting up, she indicates to Tuela that she should remain seated while she sorts out what is happening. Tuela barely has time to close her eyes when Lupita comes back in, grabbing her hand to pull her upright in excitement. Tuela, it's the poet, the famous Agostino. Someone invited him here, and oh, I cannot believe that he actually came. This is a real honor. Lupita almost shouts, forgetting her sleeping siblings. Tuela cannot say much before she is dragged outside towards the fire. She can already sense the anticipation in the air as Agostino clears his throat. What she does not expect is to have the breath knocked out of her when she faces him across the fire. He looks nothing like a poet, who in her mind's eye should be languid, short, and intense. Cinnamon brown with short, thick hair and broad shoulders, he stands a little under 6 feet. Augustino looks more like a prince than a wandering wordsmith. They lock eyes and he smiles with just the left side of his lips curling up to acknowledge her blush. Looking down at her feet, Tuela does not pay much attention as he begins to recite a poem in Portuguese, which causes an instant uproar amongst the crowd as they protest the use of the white man's tongue. Hushing the crowd to listen carefully, Augustino starts again, skillfully intertwining Kikongo with Portuguese in a political poem condemning the increased slave trade that is happening on their shores and in the marketplace just outside of Lupita's family compound. Soon, his words are heralded as several young men spring to their feet with rapturous applause. When the night grows late and the crowd begins to fade, Tuela holds back. On the arrival of Lupita's parents, all those lingering say their quick goodbyes. Tuela gets special greetings as they love her deeply. They embrace her with the warmth and exhaustion of enjoying a long evening out. They immediately retire after giving instructions to the servants to put out the fire. After a few more poems by Agostino, Lupita had finally introduced him to Tuela. She finds that he is Mobunda and also 25. He now lingers at the compound entrance as Tuela gives Lupita a final hug. Without words, she walks alongside Agostino as they take the central road into town. In their quiet conversation about nothing and everything, Agostino switches into Timbuka, which she speaks, and explains that he is a teacher in his village. As they walk side by side, they occasionally touch hands. At the intersection of the road that leads towards his lodging, Agostino looks at Tuela. With his right hand, he reaches out to touch her lips. Their eyes had long adjusted to the darkness, and she gently gives a soft nod of consent and follows him to his place, which is not far away and easy to get to in the flickering moonlight. Tuela's heart races as she wants this moment outside of time. She thinks only fleetingly of Takarai when they enter Agostino's room, and he turns to kiss her. They make love quickly, no sounds, only breathing and then respite as if starves. She holds onto him when he climaxes inside of her, as she has little fear of pregnancy since it has not happened in 7 years of marriage. When he softens, he gently removes himself from her, kisses her shoulder, and settles into sleep. She watches him as he snores, noticing the hairs of his short beard move. For some reason, this makes her giggle. She thinks of Dakarai's clean face, and this is when she remembers who she is. She quietly dresses in the encroaching dawn light and makes it back to her lodgings without another to serve as witness. She washes up quickly in cold water, traces of the sun already peeking in the rose-pink sky. Grateful that she has a room separate from her father's, she crawls into bed. The sleep that overtakes her is the most peaceful she's had in months. Thank you.
Thank you, Natasha. Everybody give it up. It's wonderful. I have many questions. I was not ready for it to end. She remembers who she is. Can you talk more about that without spoiling or?
Well, let me say this. So Tuella is the mother of Jendai, who is one of the characters in the book. She's 15, and the wife of Dakarai. But Tuella and Dakarai are Zimbabwean, and they are taken through the Angolan slave trade and end up finding themselves in Costa Rica. Tuella is pregnant and during the Middle Passage, and she dies. And though her daughter Jendai survives. And so, in thinking about writing this book, which starts with Jendai at age 15 with having a dead mother, I did not want to leave Tuella without a voice. And so the last part of writing this book was actually the prologue. And I wrote because I was very committed to Tuella's aliveness as a Black woman, as an African woman, as someone who has to remember herself as she has this moment with this poet. But she remembers that she is a wife, that that she is a sculptor, that she's a scribe for her father. But it's this moment outside of time that she really wants, because the thing that she's wanted more than anything in her marriage of 7 years is that she wants to be a mother, and she sculpts these mother and child Shona pieces, and that's sort of her signature. And so that's one of the things I didn't want to leave the book with to start the book with a dead mother, because over the course of the novel, she becomes an ancestor and very, very much integral to her daughter's spiritual development over the course of the novel, right? But I wanted her flesh, I wanted her presence, and so that's the how Tuella shows up in the beginning and remembers herself, even though she has this fleeting affair.
That's so exciting. That is so exciting. Somebody wrote in the chat, committed to her aliveness. And I was like, yes. I mean, and then the fact that she does come back and play a role, that so exciting, so exciting. Thank you for that. Thank you. T.L. Huchu is the winner of an Alex Award, the Children's Africana Book Award, a NOMO Award for African SFF, and has been shortlisted for the Cane Prize and the Grand Prix de l'Imaginaire. It's written in French, but I don't know how to do that accent. He released this book this past summer, I'm sorry, I'm going to start that. Let's start it over. I'm sorry. He released a book this past summer, The Mystery at Dumvega Castle, which is the third installment in his Edinburgh Nights fantasy series. T.L. Huchu is nominated for the 2023 Hurston Wright Foundation Legacy Award, Speculative Fiction Award for their book, Our Lady of Mysterious Ailments. T.L.
Thank you very much, Candace. Thank you all for being here. It's a bit daunting coming in after two beautiful, gorgeous, fantastic readings, but I will do the best I can with what I have. So, Our Lady of Mysterious Ailments, the story is about Ropa, who's a young ghost stalker who exchanges messages between the living and the dead. And this gets her into all sorts of weird and wonderful magical shenanigans. It's set in Edinburgh, Scotland, where I live. So I'll just read a short passage about Ropa delivering a message for a father who died just before his daughter's marriage, and this is her part and how the family receives her. The worst thing about death is how inconvenient it is for everyone involved. It seldom picks that beautiful made-for-TV moment, the patriarch lying in bed after a long life well lived, giving his adoring family his last words of wisdom before drifting off with a gentle sigh. Mediums would be out of work if shit went down like that. The tie knot guy was called Aaron McNulty, and he sat on the loo doing his business the evening before his daughter's wedding when his ticker went kaboom. He found the whole incident rather embarrassing. Not how I thought I would go out at all, he kept saying to me last night. Welcome to the club. No one's ever ready, and if they tell you they are, they're lying. I get to the house in Westburn nice and early because I gotta get this side hustle sorted out before I begin bloodhounding away. The place is nestled behind dour-looking flats with its back to Westerheld Road, which creeps up on the B701. I press the doorbell. Someone inside swears and opens the door. Fuck do you want? Says a woman with bags under her eyes. Aaron sent me, I say. You taking the piss, Han? I show her my license, and she spends an incredible amount of time reading it, even flicks it over to check the inscription on the back. I maintain a solemn face in keeping with the occasion. Who is it? A man calls from inside. Some lassie. Say she's a medium. Ghost stalker. I correct her. Misrepresentation is an offense. Let her in, the man calls out. My boots are wet, but I don't bother taking them off as I enter. The carpet is so old and stained it's not worth the hassle. Every home has a unique scent, a signature of the occupants. Here it's old fags, farts, and stale booze snagged in the fabrics. I follow the woman into the living room where people are sat on sofas, looking somber. Is Cheryl in? I ask. What do you want? I know this is a bad time. My sincerest condolences. I pause for a second. The message is for Cheryl. Go on, out with it. There is the small matter of payment. I understand the situation, but Aaron was well aware of the cost for the service. You having a giraffe? A young man in one of the armchairs stands up. My hand rests on my lap next to my dagger. My dad's died, and you're trying to scam us? The needle on the thermometer drops right in front of my eyes. The door's just behind me if things go south, but I've made the blunder of letting bad guys stand there, blocking my exit. I'm not feeling this vibe. These ends are full of nerds you don't want to mess with. They don't take too kindly to being taken for Egypt. I should have done this thing at the door. I maintain my chill and pick my mark, the source of the aggression. You must be Kieran. Aaron told me about you. Hand me that tie you've got over there. He frowns, confused, and I hold out my hand. He told me you spent weeks practicing, and yeah, you still can't get the bloody knot right. I sling the tie around my neck like it's something I do every morning. I look around the room, giving everyone a microsecond of attention. Make sure I look confident. You learn to walk with your chin up and shoulders square on the estate. Any sign of weakness and the big bad wolves are lining up, huffing and puffing outside your straw house. In time, the kiln hardens you, so you're either solid or you burn out. Either or, nothing in between. Quick glance at the pics shows me the peroxide blonde in the chair is Aaron's wife, Catriona. I might not be in school, but the streets will lend you the sort of smarts no PhD can. Wide end of the tie close to my belt, leaving the thin end longer. Cross the thin end over the right, back to the left, loop it through the center. Tough crowd watching. But I've been to Easter Road with my departed gramps to watch hips play footy. You don't faze me that easy. Down the left, no, that's meant to go right, and across switch, through the neck loop from below, down to the right, round the back, cross to the left. I must have been a gentleman in a former life. Across the front and through the loop that went round the back and then down the left-hand side. Finally, I thread through the neck loop and do the same for the right-hand side. and then loop over the right side and tuck the remainder around my neck. That is how you tie a perfect Eldridge knot. Aaron told me I might have to help you with this, I say. No, Catriona says, covering her mouth with both hands. Kieran staggers and falls back in his chair. Tears swell up in his eyes. He's barely 20, frugal tash above his lip. Them lot in here are looking at one another like they've just seen Lazarus. Aaron said he paid a kidney for this bloody wedding, and he'll be damned if it doesn't go ahead, I say. Aye, sounds like him right enough, tight Taja, Catriona says and laughs. The whole room follows, and the mercury rises a notch. Someone make this last a cuppa. Tell Cheryl to get dressed, and someone let Beastie know the wedding's back on. He's not getting out of it that easy. I breathe a sigh of relief as I'm ushered to the free dining chair at the table. A skinhead with tattoos of flames and 8/8s who's been sat quietly watching comes across the room to sit next to me. Funky. He's Aaron's brother, Walter. We talk money and he ponies up. You'll be coming to the wedding, right? He says. It doesn't sound like a request to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. So, can you talk more about the ghost talker, the medium? What brought you to bring a character like that to use, I guess, as a rhetorical device to move your story?
All right. Yeah. So, Our Lady of Mysterious Elements is part of the Edinburgh Night series. And initially, I had the idea for a short story called Ghost Stalker that was set in my hometown of Indra, Zimbabwe, which was about a young girl who talks to ghosts for a living. And I really liked the voice. I also liked the idea of being delivering messages between the living and the dead, sort of like being a commercial transaction. You know how we commercialize everything, dance videos on TikTok, anything you can think of that might have been free before is commercialized. And so Ropa exists in this world. When I did the novels, I moved them to the place that I know second best, which is Edinburgh, Scotland, where I've lived for 20 years. So I had the idea of a girl that talks to ghosts, but alongside this magic that she's been taught by her grandma, she is also starting to dabble in the world of Scottish magic. And so there's a tension between this, because she's a third generation Zimbabwean living in Scotland. And so there's this tension between her heritage and what she's been taught, and this new shiny thing that promises wealth, power, and prestige. And the series pretty much follows her arc in which she's moving towards Scottish magic, but gradually finding out that it's a lot more dubious than she thought it would be. It's not this shiny, sanitized thing that she thought it was.
So interesting. So interesting. Thank you so much. What we're going to do in this moment is open the floor up for questions from our listeners. And so I want to give everybody a moment to jot their question in the chat, but also express appreciation for these wonderful readings that we had tonight. They were so full and so rich. Kathleen says, I appreciated the rich and gorgeous language of the nominees. Yes, beautiful, unique voices. I completely agree. So if anyone has questions for any particular writer or for the group as a whole, we're opening it up now for everyone. In the meantime, what I will do is I will ask my question to all of you. When it comes to, okay, everybody here is dealing with death in some way. And what I would like to ask about is, I mean, you all have very different approaches for your particular occasion, but how you choose to depict death in your, for example, with Courtney, is completely different from the way death is depicted with Natasha and TL. So I would just like to talk more about that, like the tradition of being able to speak to a spirit, or a spirit comes and committed to her aliveness and plays a role. And then we also have Courtney's character, I believe Latasha, who, like, at least in the poem, I'm wondering about the rest of your collection, Courtney, where like it seems like that doesn't get to be a choice because you're not focused on that part of death. You're focused on the life taken away. So can you talk more about that? And I'll just popcorn it to whoever wants to start off.
I can.
Oh, go ahead, Courtney. No, go.
I often, at some place in the book, I talk about how at some point I come to the realization that what I'm doing in LA, or what I'm doing by writing about Latasha Harlins, is kind of trying to do this act of anti-erasure, kind of trying to bring forward a story that has been erased, which is so commonly the story of what happens when Black children, but particularly Black girls, are murdered or lost. And so I think my orientation towards death is, in this case, kind of trying to push against that by focusing on the life that Latasha lived for 15 years. And what was possible for her, what was difficult for her, just kind of centering on the life. But around that, of course, is the narrative of death and what her death meant politically in the city and across the nation. And so, yeah, I think it's kind of multifaceted in that way.
I'll jump in really quickly. So I think, as I said earlier, that I didn't want to begin a story of an African woman and a mother with only understanding her within the context of death and the Middle Passage, and not surviving the Middle Passage, because that is a story that is redundant in many ways in thinking about Black trauma, broken Black bodies. And so I was very committed to being alive, thinking about her voice. But also what I wanted to do was, it was less about death, but really the sort of documenting the very seamless movement and understanding of African spirituality, that without a tangible living body, an ancestor is very present. There's a voice, whether it's in dreams, whether it's very clear. And so my characters are very seamless with that. They very much are aligned and in tune, particularly with Jendai, with her mother's guidance as an ancestor. And it's not foreign, it's not something that she has to learn, it is intuitive. And that's one of the things I wanted to document, that comes out of not only enslavement, but thinking about Costa Rica. Particularly what I write about is that there was a free Black population in Costa Rica during the 261 years of slavery, and that Black population is invisible. It's not really in the narratives of history, but they did exist. And so this is what I'm writing about, their story and the African retentions. And it's not even a retention, it's just a practice, because literally they are carrying that, surviving with it through the Middle Passage and in their lives in Costa Rica. So I think my entire book was a commitment to not think about death, but really to commit to being alive.
Yeah, and I'll just jump off that and say death really is the big one. I remember in my late 20s being fascinated by Ernest Becker's seminal, The Denial of Death, the idea that death is this big thing that's always hanging over us. And we construct entire systems to deal with it, right? His whole argument was, we can create an immortality project, which is having children, or going to war, conquering land, whatever we can, as a way of trying to cheat death. but we all inevitably arrive to that moment, whether or not, we are religious and we believe that something happens afterwards. I myself, when I think about things related to it, it's only when you've really lost someone you love and care about that you begin to understand just how powerful the rituals and all those things that surround it. You don't quite get it. You can get it at an abstract level, but when you've lost and experienced real grief, it takes on a new dimension. You begin to realize that even the cliches, that the things that we say to one another when it happens, or the role of the minister or the imam or whoever attends when it happens, is absolutely vital. And it's almost like we're circling a kind of black hole. We're on the event horizon, and we simply have to conjure what might be there that we can't see. And so my attraction to this particular subject, I think, is worked into Ropa's relationship with it in the sense that for her it's a pretty normal thing, even though some of her clients will deny sort of like the legitimacy of what it is she does, or even whether what she's doing is true or not. But especially when I think about the chapter that I read, at the end of the day, there is one character who doubts, who thinks she's scamming them, but he still sees value in that. So I would just say death is the big one, and all writers and artists, whatever walk of life you're in, really, you don't even need to be involved in the arts. It's something that we all think about and philosophize over. Yeah.
Please don't be mad if you get a black hole poem from me. Don't be mad. Don't be mad. I'm not going to credit you. I'm going to just be like, death is like a black hole, but we are on the event horizon. That's a beautiful way to think about it, because we don't know what's inside. We can speculate, but we know it's there. And it exists. And energy exists. It does not die. Monique Hayes says, Courtney, are you interested in using other historical characters as narrators? What other eras would you like to explore?
Thank you. So I think, I don't know if in my future work what I'll do. I think it depends on what kind of stories or histories I'm called to, but I think that in all my work I'm kind of concerned with Black girlhood, Black womanhood, and so oftentimes I do reflect on women in history, always from this perspective usually of looking at them, observing them, comparing my life to theirs, and then not necessarily in the persona form. I think just in the sense that kind of how I honor someone's life is not to speak for them, but to speak with them. So I kind of see myself in poetry situated alongside any subject that I write about. And this question about eras is interesting. I'm not sure if there's a particular era that I'm gravitating towards, though the 90s is interesting to me. In this particular case, Latasha's murder was interesting because it happened 2 years before I was born. So just kind of being, too young to witness it, but still it entering my life in some way, was interesting to me.
Ella Shuttleworth says, I'm an English and social justice student in university. How do all of you authors feel about reading aloud to an audience, either virtual or in person? Do you like to share your work the way you intended it to be emphasized and afterwards discussed? Do you feel like you accomplish more with your work by sharing it in this way? We'll start with Natasha and then go to TL.
I love it. For me, I'm a literature professor. And so actually the happiest I am is when I can share the reading, but also even get students to engage. And, I created this book thinking basically 11th grade and up, even though, of course, there's sexual assault and slavery and other triggering subjects that I always sort of give a warning to, but I really love when students engage with the text because they always find something that I never made the connection of, and they make those connections. And I'm like, how did you see that? So I really love reading. One of the things that the only challenge, of course, is not giving away the spoilers, right? So you want people to buy the book. So you're like, well, I can't read the end, but you give a little bit of hints and clues, but I love reading and I love engaging, and it really makes me think and become sort of more connected to my characters, right? Because there's always new questions and always new perspectives. So thank you for that question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a brilliant one. I mean, most of the time, there's different parts to this, right? There's a creative component where you're alone in your own little garret, hearing these characters in your head and writing on your laptop. But after that comes like a whole collaborative phase where you're dealing with your agent, editors, whoever, fine tuning this work before it gets published. So I enjoy readings because it's an opportunity to engage with readers. I come into this as a reader first and foremost. I fell in love with literature as a kid. I'm still in love with literature, and so I enjoy going to events to watch authors perform. And if I can give just a small sliver of that enjoyment to people that want to read my stuff, then it's something that I am very happy to do. And it breaks the drudgery as well of just doing your own work. I like the collaborative aspect, and at the end of the day, the final work itself is always going to be a collaboration between the reader and the writer, since the story plays out in the stage of their mind. But when you do a reading, you do kind of get to do the voices and kind of influence how the thing is shaped a little bit more than um, would happen if the reader just went into the book directly. So I'm trying to say that I guess it's a way of subtly influencing the reader. I should insert an evil laugh there before I stop.
Even when you were reading, you were like, she offered her hand, she tied the tie in this way, and you acted it out for us. You were like becoming the characters as you read.
I'm wasted in literature. I should have been an actor. Thank you.
Leslie Young says, I'm a middle school teacher who teaches English. What advice do you give young writers you encounter that I might pass on to my students? Let's start with Courtney, then go to Natasha, and then go to Tia.
Yeah, I think I know this seems to be like the easy answer, but reading, I think like kind of diversifying the writers that you read, kind of introducing students to a decolonized canon. So making sure we're reading Black women, queer writers from all marginal backgrounds, reading internationally, like kind of just opening the lens of where students read, I think is a really good start, because from there you get to see the different ways people wield language. And I think from there, that's how your writing really evolves and becomes inspired by all other writers around you.
As someone who teaches writing, but not necessarily to elementary students, but to college students, my mantra is get it on the page, right? And so sometimes we have all these amazing ideas and they roll around in our heads, but unless they actually commit to the page and the word on the page, it doesn't exist. Right. And so obviously reading alongside, but really, I think, and what I do is with students, it's always best to start with what you know, which is yourself, right? Or at least begin the journey to knowing yourself. And so that's the story you probably want to do some writing about. So if students are going to write creatively, get it on the page, think about yourself and start with that center before you move forward, or even thinking about other writers that you like and want to mimic, or you want to emulate in some ways. It's really about getting the words to the page and committing to that story.
We've already got two sides of the coin here. Courtney, the reading, Natasha, the work, and I can only buttress that by saying there is no substitute to doing the work. In my own kind of meandering experience, it's the writers that kind of press at the end. They stick with it, that eventually get published and make it. So it's a marathon at the end of the day, and you're not just going to wake up and run a marathon tomorrow. You've got to put the practice in, the constant hard work and practice, and make those improvements. But without commitment, we would overlabor the point, but without actually doing the work, you're not going to get anywhere. So that's the difference between the people that are serious writers and the vast, and I was going to say vast majority, but the numerous people that have a novel inside them or something inside them that they're waiting to get out. Just do it. Yeah.
Natasha, you mentioned being an educator. When you do novel reading with your students, do you teach the book from the point of view of a writer or a reader?
Good question. I teach the book normally from the point of view of a reader. So yes, and usually within a broader context. So there's no novel or text that I'm not going to contextualize within a cultural, social, political, historical setting, engagement. So I guess if there's any perspective from the writer, that is kind of what is brought in. But for the most part, when I'm teaching a novel, I'm not teaching it with a writer's hat. So even though I can look at themes, everything like that, but I'm really thinking about the substance of the text, the development of the characters, but not necessarily through the dynamics of sort of writing specifically, unless I'm teaching a writing class. But if I'm just teaching literature, then I'm looking at the text within the grounding of its historical, political, social context. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, you're not like, look at that pacing. You're like, look at the content. It's a different way of looking. Like if you're thinking about a house, there's one way to go in and look at the beams, or you're like, okay, what is this architectural style? So that makes a lot of sense. TL, you mentioned the character comparing her traditional magic to Scottish magic. Is this a struggle of assimilation or colonization, although it is in Scotland?
Yeah, so I start the first novel in the series in Juniper Green, where the historian Thomas Carlyle honeymooned. And there I was trying to signal to the reader that I am telling you a history in this text. And I've always been fascinated by this period called the Scottish Enlightenment, right? So Scotland pretty much was a dead poor nation, the poorest nation in Western Europe, until it went into union with England in 1707. Now, the Scots occupy like a really interesting position of being both colonized and colonized. And when you think about the British Empire, they got a pretty good deal compared to the rest of us. So there is this ambivalence in Scottish society in talking about the role that they played in empire, right? Because they always have this narrative of being oppressed by the English and Braveheart and all that stuff. But having lived there, Edinburgh is a pretty sanitized space. For anyone who's ever come to visit, it's this quaint, Gothic, foresty city. And I kind of lived there for a while and vibed that way until I met a lady who told me about the Black history of it. And you then begin to realize how this fantastic architecture and the city is so deeply tied into to what was happening in Africa, in India, the Caribbean, and North America. So I wanted to tell that history, but I didn't want to write a historical novel. I wanted to try something different and to have a character that subtly introduces you to that history without it being too much on the nose. And yeah, because in this age that we live in, there is a lot of books where you're like, yeah, I agree with the message, but I've kind of had this numerous times before. So my first role is to try to entertain you. And if you see those underlying themes, great, but they stuff to do with like class, assimilation. Certainly, Europa, despite all her talents, is not accepted by folks in Scottish magic, and she's constantly battling her way in. Her grandma doesn't want her to have anything to do with it. So there is this constant pull and pull, this tension, which coming from Zimbabwe, which is an ex-British colony, I know part of our collective schizophrenia is we kind of go one way, go the other. Do we give up our customs and try to become this thing that the state was built to be? And so we end up as a Frankenstein's nation, which is built of these components of stuff that was introduced, and we're still grappling with those realities. So those kind of themes are there embodied in Ropa Moyo, but above you know above everything, I would like you to just enjoy the romp with ghosts and villainous villains and all that other trivial stuff as well.
Very cool. As a social justice student, we frequently discuss intersectionality and social justice in writing. For all of you, do you have any advice for navigating this kind of literature and writing on these sensitive, personal, and significant topics and events? So whether it's fiction or nonfiction, do you have advice for navigating it? I guess from the perspective of a reader or possibly a student. We'll start with Courtney and then go Natasha and TL.
Yeah, it's hard work. I think it can be emotional for the writer to navigate these topics and events. So I think kind of giving yourself grace as a writer, time, space from the work, if you have to come back to it, if you have to enter it in a different way. Yeah, I think for this, there's not kind of like a quick fix to get around the difficult nature of these topics. And so for me, what's been helpful is just kind of being patient with myself and taking time to figure out what I want to say and how I want to say it.
That's a good question. So I think there are two things. As a writer in thinking about these subjects, I have been studying and teaching and thinking about and writing on slavery and its impact for about 20 years. So in terms of the subject, it is really, I'm looking for the nuance, right? Because then I'm looking to move outside of these very stereotypical notions around slavery and the enslaved Black body. I'm really, really, really thinking about agency, representation, self-representation, and freedom. And freedom. That's really what I'm thinking about in all this work. But as a professor teaching these subjects and thinking about intersectionality, I do a lot of pre-work. So we're not jumping into a text like my novel, or I'm just thinking about like Edrich Dandycat's The Farming of Bones, which is historical fiction and documents 1937 massacre of Haitian cane workers in the Dominican Republic under the dictator Rafael Trujillo. There's a lot of historical work and conversations that go into preparing students so that we understand the places that race, class, gender, religion, all of these spaces intersect the colonial project, and thinking about violence before we actually engage with the text. So it gives them a bit more, I'm going to say, armor, right? A bit more space to be prepared, to engage, to stay and wrestle with the subject if they are already coming in with some more knowledge. And that's how I do it as a professor.
Yeah, I mean, with dealing with heavy subjects, it's very difficult because everyone's wired differently. Everyone reacts to things differently. I try to approach it with a bit of detachment and nuance, and there's also I try to have at least the knowledge that even when I deal with these heavy themes, that the world we live in, as flawed as it is, it, in my opinion, the best of all possible worlds. And I think when you're dealing with heavy themes, sometimes it's easy to get sucked in and to forget that there is, the beauty of the sunrise outside your window every day, birdsong and all that. So I just think you need a bit of proportionality in your approach to it and to realize particularly and I have friends within activist circles that this work is important. It's very important. But there's other shit going on as well, and you should try to enjoy life a bit. Not everything should be heavy all the time. Yeah.
Yeah. I think everybody on this panel would agree that there's no growth without discomfort, and discomfort is not a crime. But also, you know your own mental emotional state. And if you get halfway through the book and you're like, I I can't, I would like to be happy, then take that time and be happy. Circle back to the book later. Whatever you have to do to keep your mental emotional health steady. But discomfort is okay. Um, are any of you planning on recording your books on audio? Says I'm rewording Denise Meyer's question. Your words are powerful.
I'll start with that. I'm lucky to have audiobooks by these fantastic Zimbabwean Scottish actresses, Kimberly Bandondo and Tinashe Warikandwa. They do the accents better than me. I do not speak Scots, so there's a lot of words there that I couldn't even begin to pronounce, including that award that you read out earlier, Candice. So my
Oh, that
yeah,
wasn't French. That wasn't French. That
yeah.
was
No, that was French. That was French.
okay.
I'm just saying, my own um, diction, my own vocabulary and pronunciation is screwed up. But the audio form in itself is a work of art in its own right. And when you hear what these voice actors produce and what they can do, I couldn't even begin to compete with that. Yeah, it's a different art form.
It is not, it's something that is far desire, and hopefully one day it happens. But right now, I'm in the process of figuring out a translation for the text into Spanish. So that's kind of what I'm navigating now, because it's obviously about Costa Rican history, and Costa Rica's Black Madonna. And so the language in Costa Rica is Spanish, and it's an English language book. So in thinking about my more immediate audience, that's something that I'm trying to work through right now. So yes, audible at one day.
Yeah, I would love to have an audiobook. I think it's something I'm considering, so that might be a future project of mine.
Okay. I want to end with you guys telling us what's on the horizon. What are you working on now? Let us be nosy, just right there over your shoulder. What are you working on now? What's on the horizon? And let's go. I'm sorry, I'm staring right at you, but you can't tell. Courtney, let's start with you.
I think I'm working on some prose. I'm not quite sure what it is right now, but just in the exploratory phase of just allowing myself to write. So that's what I'm doing now. Yeah.
Okay, so not confined to any project. You are free.
Yeah.
And then I'm gonna also ask, where can we find you in the digital space?
Yes, so I have a website, CourtneyFayeTaylor.com, and so you'll be able to find Twitter and Instagram information there.
Okay. And one final word, if you want anybody to take one thing away about what the book is trying to do, what would you have them leave with?
I think there are so many takeaways. I think really kind of valuing life and particularly Black people, Black women, Black girls.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Natasha, what are you working on, girl?
Yes. So I'm working on another historical fiction text called 1710. And it's actually based in Costa Rica. And it's actually based on the historical fact that two Dutch slave ships crashed on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica in March 1710, and about 650 enslaved Africans survived. About 95 of them were captured, and they end up in the Catholic Church's archive because the Spaniards who enslaved them did not pay their taxes to the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church was like, knock, 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 we need our money. And so they end up in the archive. But the rest of the people end up along the Caribbean coast. And today there is a town called Cahuita, which is essentially a town of Afro descendants from that population from 1710 that survived. And they have just been granted indigenous land status in Costa Rica, meaning in terms that they own the land and they are protected by the government. And so I am working on that story. And it's really interesting because Samuel Jackson has a limited series, I think it's called Enslaved. And I think there's like 6 episodes, and it's about various dive teams that go all over the world looking up artifacts from sunken slave ships. And I think it's episode 4 or 5. He has a dive crew that goes out to Cahuita on the Caribbean coast of Costa Rica, and they pull up artifacts from those 2 slave ships. So that's sort of all the work I'm doing right now. Some stuff in Ghana, by the way, hopefully. We'll get out there to also Castle. And then, yeah, just digging into the archives right now. And hopefully, I don't have to wait another 7 years because that's what it took me to write Finding La Negrita. Yeah, and that's what I'm working on right now.
That's beautiful. Oh, where can we find you in the digital space?
Yes, my website. So NatashaGordonChippenberry.com, but also on Instagram, my whole name, Natasha Gordon Chippenberry. You can find me.
Okay. And if someone had just to take one thing away from your work, whether today's work or in general, what would that be?
I guess 2 things. One, in the midst of oppression, the most radical thing that can happen is love. And that for me is central. That is central to this book. And 2, there are, even under the umbrella of slavery, there are always stories of resistance, and we need to seek out the stories. We need to listen to them, and we need to honor those stories. Thank you.
Beautiful. TL, what you up to?
Natasha, if you're coming to Ghana, it's all about the food. Trust me, food here is amazing. Um, might have to. I've just finished and sent off. Sorry, excuse me. The 4th book in my Edinburgh Night series. It's called The Legacy of Aniston Hall, and I'm now going to start work this winter on the 5th and final book of the series. So I've been doing this thing for the last couple of years. I'm pretty much burnt out, but you know, when you're getting towards the end of the thing and you've thrown all these balls in the air and you're trying to catch them all, it's a bit mad. So forgive me if I might have that mad professor look about me at the moment. Yeah, so I'll do that, and then I'm looking forward to different projects in the future. There's already stuff that I've had, I've been doing notes on and been researching that I'll happily dig into once this is done.
Okay. Where can we find you in the digital space?
At Tendai Huchu, so that's just my full name. I'm down with the kids. I'm on Instagram. I'm on the platform formerly known as Twitter as well, just at Tendai Huchi, my full name.
And if somebody could only take one thing from your work, what do you hope it would be?
Fun. I want you to be diverted. I want you to go on a roller coaster and to enjoy it. If you get anything else out of it, that's a bonus. But first and foremost, yeah, I when I was a young tortured writer, I would have wanted you to get some heavy themes or whatever. But now I want to entertain you more than anything else.
Lovely. I am going to pass the mic back to Deandra. Thank you so much to the Hurston Wright Foundation for, of course, hosting these awards, inviting me to participate, and allowing all of us to enjoy this amazing work. Thank you so much. Deandra?
Thank you. I'm going to repeat the thank yous again. Thank you so much, Candace, for hosting this event tonight and asking wonderful questions and leading our engagement, listening to our wonderful nominees. I want to thank you again, Natasha, Courtney, and TL. It was so inspiring as a writer, as a way to look in to your thought process as a reader, and also to feel the connection as well from the author. So thank you so much for coming. And all of you that logged on, thank you for being with us this evening to celebrate these wonderful nominees. If you are in the DC area, we want to invite you out to celebrate them in person at the Lincoln Theater in DC. At 6 o'clock, you're able to purchase tickets from the Lincoln Theater's website, or you can visit us at hurstonwright.org, and it will also take you to their website to purchase a ticket. Please stay connected with us. Join our newsletter to find out all the wonderful things that we will continue to do for the rest of the year, as well as 2024. And with that being said, I bid you all adieu. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you so much.